Welcome to Whispers and Confessions. There might be a twist waiting, so please make sure to watch until the end. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Let's begin right away.
I'd been worried about potential performance issues, but Melissa's tender touch and sweet whispers chased away those fears. She seemed to read my mind, leading me with patience and care that only made me fall harder for her. It amazed me that I could still experience such powerful emotions at my age. A night of reunion. Never would I have imagined writing these words. At 65, I'm Richard, and everything seems like it happened in another lifetime. I've lost touch with most of my former colleagues over the years. Then, completely out of nowhere, I got a call from Melissa, my old colleague. She's 60 now. As I thought about how time had changed us both, memories came flooding back. In my mind's eye, Melissa was always this vibrant force of nature with an indefinable allure. She wasn't just talented at her job, she had this magnetic quality that you couldn't quite put your finger on. Her presence would light up a room, leaving all the men slightly on edge and completely captivated. I wasn't immune to her charm, though I was too caught up in work to really process those feelings back then. Looking back, there was definitely something between us. We could feel it in those subtle exchanges of glances and half smiles. But I was engaged to Jennifer at the time, and Melissa knew that. So we kept things professional, burying whatever we felt. Now I realize those might have been our purest, most exciting moments together. When Melissa eventually got married herself, I couldn't bring myself to attend her wedding. My feelings were too raw, too complicated. Watching her marry someone else would have been more than I could handle. But I convinced myself it was for the best. As the years rolled by, we drifted apart, losing touch completely. When Melissa's invitation for drinks landed in my inbox, my heart skipped a beat like I was 20 again. These days, Jennifer and I barely exchange two words. Our home feels like an icebox, with nothing but mechanical greetings like, "Hey," and "Welcome home," breaking the silence. I tried telling myself this was normal after 40 years of marriage, but deep down, the loneliness was eating away at me. The physical side of our relationship has been non-existent for years now. We're essentially just roommates sharing a space. Initially, I chalked it up to getting older, but something in my gut told me this wasn't how things were supposed to be. I never found the courage to address it, and Jennifer seemed equally content to avoid bringing up issues. The harsh truth is that age has taken its toll on my performance in the bedroom, and my attraction to Jennifer has faded to nothing. I thought about seeing a specialist about these issues, but pride got in the way. I tried convincing myself it was just Father Time doing his thing. But as this went on, my self-esteem took a nosedive, and I started pulling away from everything. That evening, we met at this cozy downtown bar. She flashed that radiant smile of hers, hadn't changed a bit. Despite my initial butterflies, her infectious laugh and easygoing manner quickly had me feeling like no time had passed at all. "You're looking good, Richard," Melissa said, her eyes warm and genuine. "Yeah, retirement snuck up on me," I replied, feeling a bit sheepish. "It's great to see you haven't changed a bit, Melissa," I added sincerely. Even after all these years apart, conversation flowed as naturally as a mountain stream, drifting into memories of days gone by. "Remember Project A?" Melissa asked, lazily swirling her wine. How could I forget? The night we lost all that data right before deadline and pulled an all-nighter to save it? I chuckled at the memory. Exactly. You kept bringing me coffee, telling me, "We've got this." Melissa's expression softened, and we knocked it out of the park. "You were incredible back then, Melissa. The way you never threw in the towel, saw it through to the end," I said, meaning every word. Melissa blushed slightly, smiling. "And you were the best team leader anyone could ask for, Richard. You really got us, you know? Really cared about your people." It's funny how all those crazy, exhausting times have turned into golden memories, I mused, watching the wine catch the light. right? Even those insane deadlines and stress-filled nights feel kind of special now, Melissa agreed with a nod. Back then, we were too caught up in the rat race to really see what was in our hearts. I said softly, lost in the reflection in my glass. As the evening wore on, nostalgia gave way to a comfortable familiarity. Her mannerisms hadn't changed a bit, and I was struck by how she still had that same captivating presence. The wine flowed freely, and our conversation grew more intimate. Melissa dipped into the past with a touch of wistfulness in her voice. Richard, you've always had this sweetness about you, mixed with this adorable innocence. That part of you hasn't changed at all. Melissa's eyes danced with playful affection. You think? I always saw myself as the serious one. Felt like you were always pulling me along for the ride, I replied, grinning. That's precisely what drew me to you, you know? Melissa gave me this knowing smile as she traced her finger around the rim of her wine glass. There was more she wanted to say, I could tell, but she held back. The mood shifted subtly as the night went on. Maybe it was the wine, but I started catching her stealing glances my way. Melissa, usually so chatty and upbeat, began having these thoughtful moments of silence, and I couldn't help but notice the change. Want to stick around a while longer? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Melissa looked taken aback for a moment, but then smiled warmly, saying, I'd like that. Something shifted then. We weren't just old colleagues catching up anymore. We both felt where this might be heading, though neither of us put it into words. As the night deepened, we were both quietly preparing ourselves for what might come next. By the time dinner wrapped up, we'd crossed some invisible line. Melissa's gaze would catch mine with an intensity that spoke volumes. Even our light-hearted banter had this undercurrent of loneliness running through it. How about one more drink? When Melissa suggested it, I hesitated for a beat before saying, why not? The second bar had this intimate vibe, with lighting that seemed to draw us closer together. The wine in my glass caught the light, swirling like my thoughts. We started off reminiscing again, but gradually the conversation turned to our lives now. How are things with Jennifer? Melissa asked softly. The question caught me off guard. Truth was, my marriage had gone cold as ice. After 4 decades together, the spark was long gone, replaced by silent meals and empty spaces between us when we got home. Same old, I said noncommittally, and Melissa gazed into her glass with a hint of sadness. I get it. My story's not much different. Been on my own since the divorce 10 years ago. Her voice had this vulnerability I'd never heard before. It was strange seeing this melancholy side of Melissa, who'd always been this naturally confident person. In that moment, I realized she was carrying her own weight of loneliness. Richard, I need to tell you something. You've been on my mind all these years. I had feelings for you back then, but I never spoke up. Her words completely stunned me. Her eyes held mine with an intensity that was worlds away from our earlier casual chat. I couldn't find my voice, but her words echoed in my head like a forgotten song. I never imagined I could miss someone this deeply again. But seeing you tonight, Richard, these feelings are just too powerful to ignore, Melissa said, her eyes meeting mine with a tenderness that made my breath catch. The way she looked at me was magnetic, electric. My heart drummed against my ribs as something shifted inside me, like a door slowly opening to feelings I thought I'd locked away forever. Fighting my attraction to Melissa was becoming impossible. I was falling deeper into her orbit with each passing moment. Melissa. Her name was all I could manage, my voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze spoke volumes that words couldn't capture. Time seemed suspended in the bar's intimate lighting. Almost of its own accord, my voice formed the words, "Would you like to go somewhere else?" Melissa's silent nod and gentle smile were all the answer I needed as I rose to follow her. We walked the nighttime streets toward her apartment in companionable silence, both understanding what was unfolding between us. In the elevator, her hand found mine, Warm, soft, sure. Despite my initial hesitation, her touch melted away years of doubt and anxiety. The quiet that enveloped us as we entered her apartment was charged with anticipation. When Melissa turned to face me, words became unnecessary. We came together naturally, inevitably, like two stars drawn into each other's gravitational pull. The moment the door clicked shut, years of suppressed emotion erupted between us. Our actions spoke the language of longing that words never could. Melissa's hands traced paths across my shoulders and neck with a gentleness that held surprising confidence. My heart skipped beats at this intimate touch, something I hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. My marriage to Jennifer had long since turned to ice, and I'd forgotten what passion felt like until now. But Melissa's touch was awakening something I thought had died years ago. "Richard, I've wanted you for so long," she whispered, her words sending shivers down my spine. I surrendered to her honest confession, drawn in by her boldness and uninhibited desire. Every movement she made was graceful and practiced, as if she'd choreographed this dance in her mind 1,000 times before. Her fingertips traced patterns across my chest before wandering lower, and my body responded with an intensity that surprised me. My pulse raced with an excitement I hadn't felt in ages. Melissa's smile showed she was enjoying every reaction she drew from me. Her gaze seemed to pierce straight to my soul, and I found myself wanting to know every inch of her in return. Her moves were beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of, and I found myself following her lead as naturally as breathing. "You're still as amazing as ever," she murmured sweetly, her words bridging past and present in a way that made my head spin. I let myself fall completely under her spell. She guided me with a passion that made me feel decades younger. Her confidence suggested she'd played this scene in her mind countless times, waiting for this moment. The softness of her skin ignited desires I thought long dormant. She held nothing back, giving herself completely, and with each touch, she awakened sensations I'd forgotten existed. I found myself completely lost in her artful seduction, captivated by every aspect of her. As the night deepened, our mutual desire only grew stronger. Words weren't needed anymore. Our connection transcended language. Though exhaustion eventually claimed us, we were filled with a profound contentment. Melissa's soft voice was like music in the darkness. I'd been worried about potential performance issues, but Melissa's tender touch and sweet whispers chased away those fears. She seemed to read my mind, leading me with patience and care that only made me fall harder for her. It amazed me that I could still experience such powerful emotions at my age. My passion showed no signs of fading as waves of heat coursed through my body like I was 20 again. Every caress of Melissa's hands sent electricity through me, and her intoxicating scent only heightened my arousal. I found myself completely overwhelmed by sensations I thought were lost to time. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that this was more than just a casual encounter. This night held deep meaning for both of us. When morning light crept into the room, I opened my eyes to find Melissa still peacefully asleep. The dawn light revealed her beauty in ways the darkness had hidden. Soft sunbeams played across her elegant form, highlighting every graceful curve. Her body retained a youthful vitality, and her subtle perfume still lingered in the air. Time seemed to have stood still for her beauty, and her gentle breathing made the morning feel special. Watching her sleep so peacefully made my heart ache with conflicting emotions. Last night felt almost dreamlike as I'd given myself completely to Melissa's passionate embrace. While my body still hummed with the sweet afterglow of our lovemaking, my mind was racing with mixed emotions. "Jennifer," I whispered my wife's name into the silence. For 40 years of marriage, we believed we truly understood and supported each other. Over the years, we drifted apart, with conversations becoming scarce and stilted. I told myself this was normal for long-term marriages, but last night had thrown into sharp relief just how deeply unfulfilled I'd been. The lingering warmth of Melissa's touch, the electricity of her breath on my skin. These sensations felt intoxicating and new. Her confident yet gentle approach had me completely mesmerized. Still, thoughts of Jennifer, my partner of 4 decades, weighed on my conscience. A crushing wave of guilt washed over me as the reality of my betrayal sank in. Standing at the window watching the dawn break over empty streets, everything felt surreal. I struggled to process how this one night might reshape my entire world. The passionate hours with Melissa had been undeniably magnetic, but my mind raced with questions about what would come next. I couldn't help wondering about Melissa's perspective on all this. Was this just a fleeting moment of weakness for her, or did she feel the same deep connection I did? Should we have the talk when she wakes up, or just let the night fade into memory? Taking a deep breath did nothing to settle the storm in my heart. While guilt gnawed at me, I couldn't deny that reconnecting with Melissa had awakened something I thought was long dead. She'd become incredibly important to me, yet I questioned whether pursuing these feelings was worth destroying 40 years of marriage. When I turned back to the bed, Melissa's gentle smile made my heart skip a beat. I wondered if she was wrestling with the same inner turmoil, or if this was something simpler for her, just a pleasant mistake to be forgotten. As she reached for my hand, my emotions surged, a confusing mix of joy and shame that left me reeling. What am I supposed to do now? I whispered. Melissa just held my hand silently, offering comfort without words. I kept telling myself I had to end things with Melissa. The guilt about Jennifer haunted me constantly. Yet when Melissa's text lit up my phone, "Can we meet tonight?" my resolve crumbled instantly. I knew this path led nowhere good, but I couldn't shake the memory of her tenderness, her all-encompassing warmth. So I found myself at her door again. She welcomed me with that same radiant smile that seemed to temporarily quiet my guilty conscience. Sitting beside her in the living room, my heart raced. Her words became background noise. Just being near her was intoxicating. "Let's make this night last," she murmured, and I was already powerless to resist. Her skilled touch and the passion between us consumed me once again as we locked eyes. Melissa seemed to know my body better than I did, reading and responding to my every reaction. Her practiced movements suggested she'd imagined this countless times. Each caress sent electricity through my veins. Everything about her drew me in deeper. Her warmth, her breath, her very presence. The way she smiled as she explored me, clearly enjoying every response she drew forth, had me completely enchanted. Her soft skin and graceful movements brought pleasure I'd forgotten was possible. As night deepened, I lost myself entirely in Melissa's rhythm. She guided me through waves of sensation that seemed to stop time itself. But at the height of ecstasy, reality came crashing back. Thoughts of Jennifer invaded my mind, and pleasure gave way to crushing guilt. "What am I doing?" I muttered under my breath. The weight of guilt pressed against my chest like a physical force. My time with Melissa had brought me a kind of joy I'd never known existed, but the cost was becoming unbearable. Even though I knew it was wrong to continue this affair behind my wife's back, the woman who'd been my partner for decades, I couldn't break free from Melissa's magnetic pull. That night, I found myself in her bed again, fully aware of how dangerous this path was becoming. Yet I couldn't deny how much I craved her presence, how desperately I wanted to hold on to whatever this was between us. As dawn approached, Melissa slept peacefully beside me, while I lay awake, overwhelmed with guilt. Even after I left, the shame of betraying Jennifer haunted my every step. One evening, I was going through my usual bedtime routine when Jennifer's phone buzzed on the nightstand while she was in the shower. I picked it up without thinking. The screen displayed a message from Mason, and the preview caught my eye. "Last night was?" My heart stopped dead in its tracks. With shaking hands, I opened the message thread. With each scroll, my chest grew tighter and tighter. It turned out Jennifer had been carrying on her own affair with Mason, a former coworker, during the same period as my relationship with Melissa. Their messages stretched back several months, filled with the same kind of secret rendezvous plans, passionate declarations, and fragments of guilt scattered throughout. I set the phone down and stood by the window, staring blankly outside. Oddly enough, instead of rage or betrayal, I felt something far more complicated. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Here we were, both believing we were in love while simultaneously betraying each other. While I'd been wrestling with guilt over Melissa, Jennifer had been going through the same thing. As the shower stopped running, signaling Jennifer's imminent return, I quickly replaced her phone exactly as I'd found it. Though I had to act normal, my heart felt hollow with the realization of how far our marriage had crumbled. We'd become strangers living parallel lives, each of us carrying the burden of betrayal while drowning in our own guilt.